So you've probably seen pictures of these incredible churches in Old Goa, right? They're absolutely stunning. But here's the thing, they're not just beautiful old buildings. They're a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that means they have a story to tell, a story that's much bigger than just stone and mortar. Yeah. UNESCO has this term, outstanding universal value. It sounds kind of formal, but what it really means is that this place, its story, it belongs to all of us. It's part of our shared global heritage. You see, these churches aren't just Goan history. They mark this incredible, world-changing moment when Europe and Asia collided right here. So, what's the big deal? I mean, beyond the gold and the beautiful architecture, what's the real story behind Goa being called the Rome of the East? Why does the whole world care so much? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into. Okay, so to really get these churches, you first have to get the city. We're talking about Old Goa, or Vela Goa. And listen, this place wasn't just some sleepy port town. For centuries, it was the absolute center of the Portuguese Empire in Asia. I mean, it was so grand, so important, they called it the Rome of the East. Think about that for a second. And the crazy part is how fast it all happened. It's like, boom, the Portuguese show up in 1510. A few decades later, in 1542, you have these super influential religious orders like the Jesuits arriving, and they just supercharged everything. In less than 100 years, they built these massive, awe-inspiring churches that completely transformed the city's skyline forever. So all of this quick, dramatic change created this totally unique blend of art and architecture. And that brings us to the first big reason for that UNESCO stamp of approval. These churches were like billboards for European art, spreading these styles all across Asia. But, and this is important, it wasn't just a one-way street. The style the Portuguese brought with them was Baroque. And if you don't know Baroque, just think over the top. We're talking drama, grandeur, pure emotion. This wasn't just about building something pretty. It was architecture designed to hit you right in the gut, to make you feel the power and the glory of it all. You know, what's really interesting is when you compare this Portuguese style to what the British did later on. The Portuguese were all about brick and wood, and they pretty much stuck to the playbook from back home in Europe. The British, on the other hand, they used local sandstone and limestone, and they weren't afraid to mix things up. They blended their Gothic style with Indian designs, creating this whole new thing called Indo-Gothic. And here's the key takeaway, really. The big idea might have been European, but the hands that built it, they were local. All those incredibly detailed carvings, the gold leaf altars, the paintings, so much of that was done by Goan artists, and they brought their own soul, their own skill to it, creating something that wasn't just Portuguese, it was uniquely Goan. All right, so that's the art. Now let's talk about the second major reason for the UNESCO title. Because these churches weren't just pretty buildings. No way. They were command central for one of the biggest religious movements in world history. Goa literally became the base camp for all the heavy hitters of the Catholic orders. We're talking Jesuits, Franciscans, Dominicans, you name it. This was their launch pad. From here, they spread out all over Asia, all the way to Japan. And the city itself? It became this incredible landscape of churches and monasteries, with each order trying to outdo the others, building bigger and more beautiful monuments to their faith. And if you want a symbol of that sheer ambition, look no further than the Sé Cathedral. This thing is massive. It's the largest church the Portuguese ever built in Asia. Just think about the statement they were making. We're going to build a cathedral in our Asian capital that's even bigger than the ones back home in Portugal. Wow. And its purpose was crystal clear. They started building it to commemorate their victory over the previous rulers in 1510. So its huge size wasn't just about faith. It was a flex. It was a giant, unmissable symbol of both religious and political power, sending a message to everyone in the region. Okay, so that brings us to our third and final point. And honestly, it's maybe the most famous part of the whole story. Because this isn't about buildings anymore. It's about a person. One man whose legacy is so powerful, you can still feel it in Goa today, St. Francis Xavier. The story goes that his friend Ignatius Loyola asked him this one question. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And that question apparently changed everything for Francis Xavier. He helped found the Jesuits and became this legendary missionary. And it was his final journey, after his death, that would tie him to Goa forever. I mean, this story is just wild. He dies on an island off the coast of China in 1552. It takes 2 years just to get his body back to Goa. And even then, it's over a century later that his remains are finally enshrined in the Basilica of Bom Jesus, in this incredible tomb you can still see. And here's where it gets even more amazing. The legend is that his body was found to be incorrupt, basically miraculously preserved. That, as you can imagine, made him even more famous. Today, he rests in this stunning silver casket, and get this, it was a gift from the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo de' Medici himself. That's like a rock star endorsement from 17th century Europe. And it turned the basilica into one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Asia.
But the story doesn't just stop there, frozen in time. Not at all. Because this is a living, breathing place. And that means the churches of Old Goa are facing some very modern problems, which has kicked off some really interesting debates about what preservation actually means.
Okay, check this out. You know that iconic look of the Basilica of Bom Jesus? The bare red stone walls? Well, guess what? It didn't originally look like that. A Portuguese restorer stripped off all the plaster back in the 1950s. And now there's this huge debate. On one hand, you leave it as is, because that's the image everyone knows and loves. But on the other hand, putting the plaster back on would actually be more historically accurate. And more importantly, it would protect the stone from the intense Goan monsoons. The plaster would act like a shield, a sacrificial layer. So it leaves us with this really tough question, right? When a place isn't just a museum piece, but a living center of community and faith, what's the right way to preserve it? Do you keep it looking the way we've gotten used to? Or do you restore it to what it once was, to help it survive for centuries to come? It's a fascinating problem, and it proves that the story of these incredible churches, well, it's far from over.